I'm meteorologist John Weatherby.
The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, and I'm your host, Bob Roth, and it must be Friday. It's the last Friday of March. We are down the first quarter of 2018. Unbelievable. Where does the time go? Here we are. We have a studio full of people, and I don't get this very often. I've got a number of guests here today, and the main guest of honor is the gentleman that's serving right here to my right, and it's Dr. Kevin Haselhorst. He's making his third appearance here at Health Futures, taking stock in you. Dr. Haselhorst, can I call you Kevin?
You may.
Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob. It's good to be back. Yeah, it was hard to believe this is 3 years since I started talking with you on the radio, and
right,
and it's a pleasure to be back again.
Well, we're talking about something different this time, but we're also going to go back to talking about some of the old stuff too, because it's still very, very relevant.
I agree.
What we do every day. And just to my left, to your right, is my daughter, who is in for the Passover holiday. Sami-Jo is her formal name in the business sector, and we call her Sami-Jo. Sami-Jo has been on the show before. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
Good to have you on the show. And then just to her right, my left, is a veteran of our show. He's done radio before. He used to have his own radio show, and he is getting ready to celebrate in April his 15th year of being in the senior placement assistance business. He can talk a little bit more about that, but welcome to the show, Scott Fischer.
Bob, good to be here again. We were in this studio doing our show a couple of years ago. It was called Planning Past 50, so it's great to be back.
Well, it's good to have you back. And to his right and my left is a gentleman that looks a little bit like my older brother, but he's not my older brother. He's my father. Sheldon Roth, a.k.a. Noodles.
Hello,
Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here. It's my first time, but I'm looking forward to it.
Have you ever done radio before?
No, it's my first time.
Okay. Well, you know what? Great to
Fooled
have
us.
you. Great to have you on the air.
I might be a good substitute for you in the future.
Well, I got to tell you, Wes, our engineer, just chimed in. I don't know if you heard what he said. Fooled us.
Yeah.
You sound really good. You got a great radio voice.
Got it going.
Got it going on. Well, I'll tell you what, I want to pivot right back over to Dr. Haselhorst. Kevin, you are an emergency physician over at Arrowhead Hospital. You've been doing this a number of years. You see so much as it relates to people coming into your ERs. And, you know, you have written a book called Wishes to Die For. We'll talk a little bit more about that maybe in the second or third segment. But you got this new booklet, and it's called Palliative Care, Is It Right for You? And I want you to talk a little bit about it, because palliative is something that's relatively new, and as I understand it, palliative means comfort. So can you please explain to our listening audience a little bit about what this is all about?
I appreciate that intro, because I think the confusion around palliative care, in fact, it's been around for a long time. And the word itself means to cloak the person, to protect them, to sort of shelter them. And what I see, you know, when people aren't protected or have their situation managed, inevitably they end up in the emergency room at some point. And most of the focus is not on end-of-life care or necessarily comfort, but how do you manage chronic illness? And there are always two sides to every problem in terms of you can either be aggressive or you can kind of lighten up a little bit. And I think when we were talking about the over-the-hill journey, when he mentioned the life after 50 and this sense of, there's a whole new beginning to your life after 50. And again, you look at it from the perspective of there being a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so I'm all about trying to keep it simple now so people don't get confused about where they are in life and how to sort of gear their thinking, because obviously you treat an 85-year-old gentleman different than a 45-year-old gentleman. And so I divide up the age ranges between like 45 to 65. 65 to 85 is more the middle ground, and then after 85 is more the end of, and we all, that's just nature. That is life. And
I think we have all that represented here today.
I think so too. I thought it was an interesting collection of
there
people.
You go.
But this idea of the middle of life is where palliative care really takes hold. After the age of 65, you want to sort of lighten up. You want to be able to refuse some medical treatment that doesn't make sense to you anymore. You're at that stage in life where you want to be able to not have other people tell you what to do. You want to be able to prioritize what's important to you. And I really think the bottom line to my message is, particularly when you're coming into the emergency room, is this a person who wants to stay in the hospital, or is this a person who prefers to go home? And it's a very challenging situation, because people aren't usually given the freedom to make that decision. They're ultimately they prefer that it's just understood that they'll be admitted to the hospital when they have a life-threatening illness, and chronic illness always eventually evolves into something life-threatening from time to time. But as people get admitted to the hospital several times over, they're pretty adamant that being admitted to the hospital isn't changing their quality of life. In fact, there's some studies saying that even a trip to the emergency room can set people back several months in terms of their ability to get back on their feet again. You can imagine extended stay in the hospital is really detrimental to anybody's sense of well-being and quality of life. So what I'm asking people to do is think about this before you enter the emergency room as to what your goals are. And particularly if you're at that point where you don't want to be admitted to the hospital, tell me up front. Tell me you receive palliative care, and I'll treat you much differently than somebody who doesn't express up front what their wishes are.
And that really is a great segue into something we'll talk a little bit more later on the other segments, is just that whole planning and really putting your affairs in order. Yes, right at that moment you're going to the ER, yes, you need to be able to be clearly, you need to be a clear mind to really decide what you want to do, but also making sure you've memorialized your wishes. And, we talked about, at the very beginning when we started the show, National Healthcare Decisions Day is coming up April 16th to the 22nd, and so many of our population have not even given this some thought. So I want to just, unpack what you said and just share a story with our listening audience. And my father knows this gentleman. We recently lost a very good friend to pancreatic cancer. And I think everybody listening here, especially if you have a loved one or someone that has had pancreatic cancer, it's one of the probably worst kind of cancers you can get, because the success cure rate is very, very minimal. And, you usually don't have very long, maybe 3 to 6 months. And here's a gentleman, and he followed the same course that so many people I know that have gotten this diagnosis is his first reaction was to do treatment. So he went through his first round of treatment, which ended up putting him back into the hospital, and he nearly died from his first round of treatment. So here he is back in his home, and he's with his daughter, his adult daughter, because he's in his mid-60s, late 60s, and he is wanting to keep going and having more treatment. And his daughter and his son said, Dad, you don't have to do this. And the reason why he wanted to do it, Kevin, he wanted to do it because he felt like he was letting them down. He did it from a guilt perspective. It wasn't so much him wanting to do it. It was the fact that if he didn't try, he would feeling like he was letting his children down. And his daughter asked me to intercede and said, will you please tell him that I don't want him to do it? And I sat there across from him, and I knelt down while he was in his recliner, and I looked him in the eye, and I just said, listen, I said, do you want more good days or bad days? You make that decision. How much more time did your doctor tell you would get by going through this treatment protocol? And he said 3 to 6 months. I said, how much time did he tell you had? He said 3 to 6 months. And I said, he gave you no guarantees. He said, right. And I said, you want more good days. You don't want more bad days. So those are the kind of discussions that we need to have.
Exactly. You know, I actually physically stand on each side of the stretcher as I'm explaining their options and clearly relating that the idea that the healthcare system, the door is wide open to you receiving any and all care that we have available to you, whether it includes surgery or radiation or chemotherapy. Go for it. If you're a glutton for punishment, this is the option you might choose. On the other hand, you know, I stand on the other side, which is kind of the right side of your brain that would think a little bit outside the norm and say, you know, if you choose not to do any of this, you can be taken care of at home without having to do anything. And none of these decisions, whatever choice you make, is not wrong. And I think there's still a sense that making the choice to do nothing is wrong, but I really sugarcoat it in a way that says this is really, it speaks to the person that's at ease, at peace with his life. If there's still something you need to prove, you know, if they're almost coerce them into not seeing just one side of the problem.
Yep.
And it really is, it's so enlightening for them to feel into it. And again, I'm the gatekeeper. Whichever way they swing, I open the door and the other door closes. You can't have it both ways. And that's why I want to make sure that palliative care is more messaged along the outside as being an outpatient type of care rather than an inpatient type of care.
And I think, Kevin, you get a chance to see what happens when they don't choose palliative and all of this invasive stuff is done to them and the pain and suffering that they go through.
There's no point of there's no end to what the system can do for them. You have to reconcile within yourself what you're required to do. And I think, again, earlier in life you say, no one would ever choose. They would say, I never want to do chemotherapy. And as soon as they get the life-threatening illness, they choose to do the chemotherapy.
Right.
So there's something about having your wishes, but then you don't stand on your principles. And your principles are being willing and able and ready to act when the time comes.
We're done our first segment. Kevin, we got a lot more to get into. We're down one segment here at Health Futures. I got Dr. Kevin Haselhorst here in the studio. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, Phoenix, Larry Kudlow here. Be sure to join me every Saturday at 2 p.m. on the Southwest's longest-running financial talk radio station, the one and only Money Radio. And during the week, don't miss Mastering Money with hosts Steve Jurich and Ken Morgan daily at 8 a.m. right here on Money Radio 1510 AM and 105.3 FM.
For podcasts, download the free Mastering Money app for both Apple and Android and visit masteringmoneyradio.com.
Hi, everybody. Bill Tatro here. You know, being on the radio here in the Valley for over a decade and across the country for over 30 years, so much of my advice was based on the world's economic impact on the markets. The show was called It's All About Money. And since then, I've produced a newsletter that shares those same insights. Not specific advice for a product or service, but rather an economist's viewpoint that might help guide you in your financial choices. Dozens of articles each month are delivered right to you, designed to educate and help you control your economic future. To be informed is the best preparation for the future. I'm back and offering Money Radio listeners the opportunity to receive my newsletter for more than 50% off. That's right. Money Radio listeners can get my newsletter for over half off the monthly price. Go to BillTatro.com/moneyradio to get this exclusive offer. That's less than $10 per month to get peace of mind directly to your inbox. Go to BillTatro.com/moneyradio today.
The skills you can develop as a soldier in the Army National Guard can give you an edge in the high-tech job market of tomorrow. The Guard offers career training to take advantage of your skills in science, technology, engineering, and math that can help give you a leg up to a high-paying and rewarding STEM profession. Get a head start on your career while earning money to pay for college. Log on to NationalGuard.com to learn about all of the STEM career opportunities in the Army National Guard. Sponsored by the Arizona Army National Guard. Aired by the Arizona Broadcasters Association and this station.
Suffering from knee or back pain? Call 800-616-KNEE and learn how a Medicare-covered knee or back brace may solve your pain. 90% satisfaction rating. 800-616-KNEE.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and I've got a full studio here today. I have the pleasure of having Dr. Kevin Haselhorst here in the studio. He's an emergency physician and an expert on advanced care planning from Arrowhead Hospital. It's great to have him in the studio. I've got Scott Fischer. He's from Options for Seniors. And I've got my daughter, who is a political journalist working in Washington, D.C., working on the crazy madness that is going on as what we call our government, and she's reporting that on every day here in the studio. And just to my left, I've got my carbon copy, or he calls me his carbon copy. I say that I'm his 2.0 version. I've got Noodles. That's his nickname, Sheldon Roth. And I'm just happy to have everybody here in the studio. And it is Friday, March the 30th, last Friday of the quarter. And just real quickly, a big shout-out to our Diamondbacks. I got a chance to go to that game last night. We got 161 more games, but I got to tell you, Patrick Corbin, our starting pitcher, looked awesome, and so did Jake Lamb. Awesome. I mean, we really have potentially the makings. I know we say this every year, don't we, Scott?
We're in first place, right?
We're in first place.
We're in first place.
and we have a perfect record.
We got a perfect record. Yeah, well, baseball makes everything better in my world.
Well, it does in, I think, most of America's world. And, so many people are getting disenchanted with NFL and what's been going on with the NFL. And, baseball's been around a long time, and it's kind of a rite of passage for us in America. And it's great to see the Diamondbacks and great to see baseball starting again.
Amen to that.
So if you missed our first segment, I've spent most of the time here talking with Dr. Haselhorst, and we were talking about palliative care and if it's right for you, and we were talking about advanced planning, and we were talking about people just really making that decision when they show up in the ER, what kind of treatment do they want to have, or as Kevin shared with us, you can opt to be able to go home and be comfortable and really have a palliative approach to it. And I want to share with our listening audience, my father here, he escaped the throes of not being here anymore. He was living up a Payson at the time and suffered a major heart attack. We ended up discovering it was a 99% blockage of the left descending ventricle. Did I say that right, Kevin?
Yes.
Yeah, and thank God, the anterior.
Well, it's left anterior descending, LAD.
Right, left LAD. So not LED, but LAD.
LAD.
But, thanks to the modern medicine and technology and transportation, they air flighted him from Payson over to Honor Health Osborne. And he was here in less than 20 minutes. And probably within 4 hours, he was on the cath lab getting catheterized and opening up that ventricle. But, I'm just blessed as my family is to still have him here with us. He celebrated a birthday. He's 82 years old. And, you talked about earlier in the first show, 50 is not really the end. It's
the new beginning.
It's the new beginning. And certainly 82 isn't what 82 used to be. We're becoming more active.
It is what you make it. And he has a sense of wellness. He has a great smile, a great demeanor. I wouldn't have never known that he had any heart disease. And I think that sense of wellness reflects, I think that's how we should, it's the people I'm concerned about, naturally, the people that are not well, right, and that we're continuing to do things to that don't necessarily seem respectful. And I really compliment for it's a tribute to who he is as a very stout and has a good DNA. He's been able to weather these kind of incidents, and there are many survivor stories out there that are quite remarkable. People who survive cancer. I'm humbled by these people and their ability but I also think that not everybody gets that lucky or has the propensity or that
desire to win,
luck
and will to live. And it's interesting as you talk about the measures that people go through, statistically, and I've heard it as much as 50%, but the number that I've also read is 30%. So 30% of the Medicare expenditures are attributed to about 5% of the beneficiaries that die each year. Get your hands around that. I mean, 30% of the Medicare dollars are being spent on the 5% of that population that dies within 1 year. And that and I look at you, Dr. Haselhorst. I mean, that you see these people show up in the ER and that have done no planning, have not even thought about when they come in, and all of a sudden they get stuck on life support, and there's no advance directives. There's no decision-making being made.
I would venture to say that a great percentage of those people did not want any of that done to them, that they were coerced into it and didn't have the ability or the support mechanism to allow them to refuse medical treatment.
Right, and even if they have done it, I'm sure you've seen family members say, well, no, I want you to try to keep them alive, and you look at the advance directive and says, no heroic means. I don't want to be put on life support. And you probably see that debated almost every day.
But then we would just say, well, we're just going to do it for a little bit, which only adds, it's like the mission creep. We start with a little bit, and then it becomes an ICU admission, and then it becomes, a death in the hospital, and and then no one ever wants to say, well, it's time to quit. So it becomes this unending conundrum with, why didn't we stop this from the get-go instead of putting them through this, given the fact that they had already had several medical conditions that would have suggested that they weren't long for this world. And that's why I think palliative care really should recognize the people who have end-stage disease that involves your heart, your brain, your lungs, your kidneys. When you have a vital organ that is compromised, how do we treat people? Do we keep putting them through the mill, or do we sort of allow them to deal with this, manage the situation as best they can, particularly more in the home environment where they prefer to be anyway?
So explain to our listening audience and to us here in the studio, how is palliative care really different than medical care?
Well, let's say, you've got two sides. You've got critical care and then you've got comfort care. So critical care obviously is in the ICU. Comfort care is at home. Now you've got advanced care and you have palliative care, which are kind of closer into the middle ground. Advanced care is pretty much you're going to be in the hospital, but you really don't want any heroic measures. You want to try to improve, get well enough to be able to go home again. Palliative care is pretty much you end up in the emergency room, but you're adamant about not going. You don't want to be admitted to the hospital because you know that that's going to be another obstacle for you to overcome in terms of having to get out of the hospital. If your goal is to not be in the hospital, why do you allow yourself to be put in the hospital? Palliative care ideally should support you in the home environment. Now, I'm the only one who speaks this way. The people that are agencies around palliative care, educators, still want to make palliative care for everybody. And they want to sort of provide palliative care in the hospital, at home. It confuses everybody when it's so expansive and you're not really focusing in on what the needs of the patient are. And most people at some point want to be returned to be treating as a person rather than as a patient. As soon as you're admitted to the hospital, you're declared a patient. When you're at home, you're not a patient, you're a person. And that's...
I love it. No, I really do, and I hope our listening audience and here in the studio, you guys got it. It's halftime here at Health Futures. It's hard to believe it. We'll be right back.
Radio 1510 AM and 105.3 FM.
A second autopsy has been performed on the body of an unarmed black man gunned down by police in Sacramento. Dr. Bennett Umalu ruled Stephon Clark was shot multiple times in the back.
Each one of these bullets independently possessed a fatal capacity, meaning that out of all the 7, all he needed to have died was just one of the 7.
The widow of the Orlando nightclub gunman who killed 49 people has been acquitted of charges she helped him with the attack. Susan Clary, spokesperson for Nor Salmon's family, says she will now start anew.
The family is elated. Nor can go home now to her son, Zach, resume her life and try to pick up the pieces from 2 years in jail. We really hope the best for her future, and we want people to know that she is not guilty. She is innocent.
Wall Street is closed for Good Friday. I'm Ann Cates.
When you're dealing with life's ups and downs, it helps to know the ins and outs of insurance. Let Farmers share with you practical knowledge gained from more than 90 years of experience. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, bum.
Why do we call it small business? Why not agile business, nimble business, dance circles around the big, bulky behemoths business? Ooma Office, the small business phone solution, has a virtual receptionist to direct calls to the right extension and a mobile app to help you answer while away from the office. But all that's small really is the price, starting at only $19.95 a month. Visit Ooma.com, that's OOMA, or call 866-649-9377 to find out more. Ooma, the phone your small business deserves.
When you're dealing with life's ups and downs, it helps to know the ins and outs of insurance. Let Farmers share with you practical knowledge gained from more than 90 years of experience. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
If you can get a signal on your smartphone, then you can listen live to Money Radio. Download our app for free and never miss a moment of the great advice.
Market Wrap listeners, join host Mo Ansari for his next seminar on Wednesday, April 4th in Scottsdale, where he'll talk about ways to make money in today's markets. With the markets at all-time highs, what should you do with your excess cash positions? How will the Fed's rate decisions impact your portfolio? With international markets outperforming, how much should you have in your portfolio? How much real estate should you own? And how much risk should you be taking with your investments? You can also make an appointment to meet with him on Thursday, April 5th and get your free portfolio review. That's Wednesday, April 4th for the free seminar and Thursday, April 5th for your free appointment with Mo. Just call pound 250 on your cell phone and say talk to Mo for reservations. Again, from your cell phone, call pound 250 and say talk to Mo or register online at compact.com. That's COMPAK.com.
Compact Asset Management is a registered investment advisor. Funds custodian, Fidelity Institutional Wealth Services, member FINRA SIPC.
Hi, everybody. Bill Tatro here. You know, being on the radio here in the Valley for over a decade and across the country for over 30 years, so much of my advice was based on the world's economic impact on the markets. The show was called It's All About Money. And since then, I've produced a newsletter that shares those same insights. Not specific advice for a product or service, but rather an economist's viewpoint that might help guide you in your financial choices. Dozens of articles each month are delivered right to you, designed to educate and help you control your economic future. To be informed is the best preparation for the future. I'm back and offering Money Radio listeners the opportunity to receive my newsletter for more than 50% off. That's right. Money Radio listeners can get my newsletter for over half off the monthly price. Go to BillTatro.com/moneyradio to get this exclusive offer. That's less than $10 per month to get peace of mind directly to your inbox. Go to BillTatro.com/moneyradio today.
Find great deals on Beautyrest's new collection of mattresses during the Beautyrest introductory event. Find a retailer at BeautyRestRetailers.com. Get your Beautyrest at Sleep System in Phoenix.
Bruce Vail with Your Money Now. As part of its iOS 11.3 introduction, Apple today rolled out a beta version of Business Chat, a tool that will allow retailers and other companies to converse via text with customers using the Messages app on iPhones and iPads. Home Depot, Discover, Hilton, Lowe's, Marriott International, and Wells Fargo are among the companies that have signed on to use the system. Customers can start a chat by pulling up one of the businesses with Apple Maps or with a browser. They can ask about items in stock at nearby stores and even pay for something in chat using Apple Pay. The service puts Apple into a territory where Facebook and Google have been active. Business Chat could help Apple keep customers within iOS rather than losing them to another company's product. It is a quiet day on Wall Street. The markets are closed today in observance of Good Friday. That's Your Money Now.
Save up to 50% off on over 200 floors at Lumber Liquidators' end-of-quarter clearance sale. Choose from the best selection of wood-look waterproof flooring, like vinyl plank and wood-look tile, up to 50% off. All water-resistant laminate is up to 36% off. Get pre-finished hardwood up to 33% off. More from just 39 cents while supplies last. And take an extra 15% off clearance at your local store. Plus special financing. The end-of-quarter clearance sale's going on now at Lumber Liquidators.
Stocks are soaring, and construction spending across America has been on the rise. If you've been waiting to build, the time is now. Whether you want to expand your business or you want to build a new garage, call General Steel today. Our metal buildings are custom designed for your needs. For example, a 40 by 60 is a great space for an auto shop or 3-car garage. And if you call General Steel today, it's on sale now for under $25,000. Call 866-95-STEEL. 866-95-STEEL. That's 866-957-8335.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. We're in the second half here at Health Futures. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and we got Dr. Kevin Haselhorst here in the studio. I've got the pleasure of having Scott Fischer here from Options for Seniors, and I've got my daughter, Samantha Jo, a.k.a. Sami-Jo, and I've got my father, Sheldon Roth, a.k.a. Noodles, here in the studio. So happy Friday, last Friday of the month. We talked a little bit about Diamondbacks baseball, but we really got a chance to talk about palliative care, and that's really why we're here today. We're talking to Dr. Haselhorst about this. We talked a little bit about advanced directives and National Healthcare Decisions Day. But, you know, I'm sitting here holding this book, and this booklet, Kevin, you put together is palliative care right for you? And, you know, Scott, when we were at the break, you asked a question, and I think it's a really good question because those of us that are in healthcare have heard about palliative care.
And it came to me a couple of years ago where the concept of palliative care was brought up as almost like a pre-hospice kind of a program, and it was presented to us by hospice personnel who were looking to for us to drive visits or attract visits to their particular hospice. So people developed these palliative care programs. I haven't heard anybody like you who stands apart from that to say this is the concept or educating the community on palliative care services. And even after 3 years, a lot of us are really still confused about what is involved in palliative care. So I love that we're talking about this, and if you could kind of help us through that, that'd be great.
And can I ask one other question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who pays for it?
Right.
And how does it get paid for as well? So
interesting. Well, that's exactly why I wrote the book, is because I couldn't, when people were sort of at their end of the ropes, I would say, do you want me to call hospice? And they were immediately taken back by that suggestion, and I had nothing more to offer them. And even so, I've really made palliative care more of a message of what speaks to the heart of what people really want. They don't want to stay in the hospital, and they don't want to necessarily I think hospice means you're going to die, and pre-hospice only sort of suggests the same kind of endpoint. But the fact of the matter is people live with chronic illness for many, many years and are not necessarily dying, and they're having, and I'm breaking apart this they always mix hospice and palliative care organizations together. I prefer that palliative care be mixed in with home care. That's how my father messaged it. He said, don't call it hospice care, call it home care. And that made total sense to me, because that's exactly how he doesn't want people to see him as dying. He wants people to see him as still being viable and to be respected and to have choice in the matter. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as someone has a voice, they're on palliative care. They can pick and choose what we are to do with them. Once people can no longer speak for themselves, I think that's pretty much end of life at that point. And in fact, I pretty much am confused by hospice in general, because there's a sense about ads that say you can live life fully. I don't get that. If this is end of life care, I want end of life care. I don't want somebody worried about the quality of my life, or if I'm doing enough to make everybody else happy around me. I want to be free, you know. I want to live life freely. I don't want to be coerced into taking I don't understand why patients on hospice are taking antibiotics. If you're end of life, what does antibiotics do to end of life other than prolong your suffering in some respects?
I love that what Kevin said is that is really a natural relationship between your business and the palliative care.
Did you see me smiling?
Right.
I mean, home care.
No, I was like, so that because we always hear it, and it's packaged by the hospice companies as the pre-hospice.
And you know what? I'm reading Kevin's booklet here, and I'm on page 21, and there's just a little saying here. It says, "We all want to die with dignity."
Exactly.
And you know what? That's the optimal word, dying with dignity, rather than having all these tubes and, things done to you when you know there's really no hope.
That's end-of-life care, but palliative care is really living with dignity.
Right.
So that you are doing... You're getting your voice in how you want to be treated, and particularly around this idea of staying at home versus being admitted to the hospital.
You having the conversation with your friend. Where do you want to have more good days than bad?
Exactly.
And not choosing to do another round of chemo that was going to break his heart and not give him any more quality of life.
He almost died the first round
from the first round through.
Yeah, I mean, he put him in the hospital, and I mean, he nearly died.
Right.
And why go through that again? I asked that question too about who pays for palliative care, and I know that it's a Medicare benefit.
No, it is.
It's not.
Yeah,
well, I see. There you go. I don't even know that.
Part of the thing is, palliative care organizations have not given the government a message that says this is a valuable benefit for patients, and particularly hospitals who are concerned about readmissions. If you gave people the choice and the ability not to be admitted to the hospital, they would take that if somebody's going to give them the home support that they need. Right now, no one wants to pay for it because they don't necessarily see the benefit if you're just going to return to the hospital when the time comes. If you're on palliative care, you don't call 911. You call the palliative nurse, who comes out and makes the assessment and decides, how can we best manage your situation at home? There's no need to go to the hospital when you don't want to be admitted to the hospital. If you fell and broke your hip, you're not a candidate for surgery. You weren't a candidate for surgery last week. What makes you a candidate for surgery now, other than you could potentially die? But we already knew that you had an illness that was you were vulnerable to dying, or you were set up to die. We're really making people very confused about the decisions that they're having to make, when a lot of this is in your certain categories. This is how we treat people. End of life means we don't do any. There's no reason to put a breathing tube or a feeding tube in somebody at the end of life.
So what's interesting is that you and I are stuck with the same thing relative to our federal government. Home care is a benefit that is not paid for either by the federal government, and palliative care is not either. And what you're talking about is someone being comfortable in their home. And you know what? We had a breakthrough that just happened February 1st, 2018, this year, where the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, has made the determination that Medicare Advantage plans will be able to use home care as a benefit. And I'm talking about in-home care services, not clinically based, non-medical, to be able to enable someone to stay in the comfort of their home. Why? Because it's the one that they desire to be, and two, it's the least costly.
Correct.
So how do we get home care and palliative care to be part of the same equation?
People have to claim it. When I say, is palliative care right for you? My dad would have said, yes. I don't when I fall and tumble, I hit my head. Don't send me to the hospital. I'm okay staying here. I'm on palliative care. If I get worse in my home care environment, you know what to do. You comfort me.
Right.
You don't have to take me to a trauma center. The system is set up for everybody doing more than what's reasonable, and I think the government is held hostage by the healthcare system too. We're all afraid about rationing medicine and not giving people what they want. But people, when they stop and think about it, they don't even want what's being offered to them. It's kind of like the entitlement thing. The Medicare gives people lots of options to go to the doctor and go to medical specialists, but there's a point where I don't want to see another medical specialist, and I do not want palliative care listed as a medical specialty. It should be more of a nursing practice. To be able to manage somebody in their comfort of their own home, you don't need a rocket scientist. You need a mother who knows how to care for you.
It almost seems to me in the progression of this that the discussion be shifted to the hands of the primary care physicians who are serving a lot of these seniors, Bob, that are on your services. I'm thinking of my own particular mom, that they would funnel people towards the palliative care programs that really provide service and support without it jumping right to the discussion of hospice, which then they back you into the conversation about palliative care, right?
I think it's actually the social workers. When a patient is admitted to the hospital, I give everybody the right, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. No, fool me once, shame on you, which is the conundrum where people get in the hospital. You have the social worker give them this book about, is palliative care right for you? You start enrolling people into the conversation about you not making the same mistake twice. If you make the same mistake twice, shame on you.
Right.
That you didn't avail yourself to services that could have made life a lot easier instead of what you're putting yourself through. I think the doctor, unfortunately, is not the best advocate for end-of-life care or
the primary care
palliative
physician.
Care.
I mean,
I think again you can introduce it, but you can't. Even when there are palliative care physicians, I see a lot of palliative care physicians who still will put a trach in a person who have not had a conversation about not coming back to the emergency room or not coming back to the hospital. Nobody wants to give up on people. People have to make this choice not to be to be at peace with the decision not to do more.
You know, one of the things that you said to me, Kevin, the last time you were on the show, and you made a big stink about it, and I support what you were saying, and certainly I want you to, and if it's not this segment, maybe even describe it more into the last segment, is you were upset and angry that Muhammad Ali died in a hospital. And you know what? You said, why? I mean, we knew he was dying for a long time. Why did he die in a hospital?
He didn't have palliative care. No one talked to him about less is more.
Right.
He could have had the comfort of his home. Instead, that he was admitted to the intensive care unit and was maligned in his final hours instead of comforted. I don't get this. This is a fighter. This is someone who stood up for himself, who stand in the boxing ring and knew how to handle himself.
And his human rights, too. He was a human rights activist.
Exactly.
He was a fighter.
Exactly.
And of course he's going to fight all the way to the end, but he wasn't given that choice.
No, he didn't.
Someone made that choice for him.
Well, someone just talked to him from one side of his brain and said, "You're going to keep fighting, right?" And
right, exactly.
And he probably agreed to that, but at the same time, he didn't understand the value of being at peace.
Well, we're up against a break. It's hard to believe we're down 3 segments. It just flies by, doesn't it? Noodles, first time. Can you believe how fast it goes?
It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
I feel like we just got here.
We're talking palliative care. I've got Dr. Kevin Haselhorst here in the studio. When we come back, I want to talk about some examples, some of the stuff that you get to see in the ERs. You're listening to Health Futures. We'll be right back.
Hey, Money Radio listeners. This is Gary Kaltbaum. Make sure you tune in for my show, Investor's Edge. You'll get my take on the markets and the world and what to look out for tomorrow. Investor's Edge is one of Money Radio's longest-running shows, so don't miss it.
You can listen to Investor's Edge Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. here on Money Radio 1510 AM and 105.3 FM.
Tommy's Place would like to invite you to experience the authentic taste of Italy. Tommy's Place is proud to offer superb meals with New York flair in a cozy setting. You'll find dishes like penne alla arrabbiata, tender shrimp delicately sautéed with garlic, tomatoes, and basil. Try one of their signature homemade pastas, delicious burgers, sandwiches, veal, and seafood prepared using only the finest ingredients. Tommy's Place, 2827 East Bell Road. Great, quiet place for lunch meetings and happy hour.
Would you know what to do if you encounter a wrong-way driver? Let's hope you never find out. But if you ever do see a wrong-way driver coming at you, slow down, safely steer away, and get off the roadway. At night, drive defensively and be aware of what's ahead and around you. And if you see a sign warning of a wrong-way driver, safely move toward and take the next freeway exit on the right. Drive aware. Get there. Sponsored by the Arizona Department of Transportation in partnership with the Arizona Broadcasters Association and this station.
The following update is for drivers who pay too much for car insurance due to DUIs, DWIs, tickets, or anything else. Our company specializes in low-cost SR22 auto insurance. We know that mistakes happen and offer free quotes for very affordable auto insurance meant specifically for you, the overpaying high-risk driver. The quote is free, and we'll handle the filing so you can start saving money. Call 800-749-2984, 800-749-2984, 800-749-2984.
Celebrate the D-backs' 20th anniversary at the game this Saturday. Game time is 5 p.m. and fans will take home the 1998 replica jersey. Visit dbacks.com.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Wes, this is awesome. Let it go. This is baseball. John Fogerty. Doesn't get any better than this. It's baseball season. I am so psyched. And it is all about the Diamondbacks. Well, no, not really. It's about Health Futures. We have a radio show to do, and this is our last segment. And I got a lot of stuff yet to unpack. And we've got Dr. Kevin Haselhorst here in the studio. He's an ER physician and an expert on advanced care planning over at Arrowhead Hospital. We've got Scott Fischer here in the studio from Options for Seniors, and my daughter, Samantha-Jo, and my father, Sheldon Roth, a.k.a. Noodles. And when we were at the break, Dad, you asked a great question, and I said, save that for when we get back on the air. So can you share with Kevin what you'd asked?
Well, what I asked him was, shouldn't the government play a role in paying for some of this?
Well, yes, I agree about the palliative care element because they're not giving people enough power to stay in their own home. As soon as something goes wrong, you can't manage the situation, you call 911, you end up in the hospital, in the emergency room, and then you're swept up in the system because obviously you're sick enough, you've got a life-threatening illness, they're going to do everything to reverse it, and no questions asked. Now, the government is afraid to ration any kind of health care benefits because there's pushback against that, and no legislator wants to be a part of somebody contributing to the end of somebody's life. So they're kind of held hostage in some respects by a society that feels saving lives at all cost is important, and I get that at certain stages of life, but in the middle stage, I think there should be more priorities given to the person in terms of their ability to refuse care. And I think we talked about the Medicare benefit, how the entitlements tend to avail people to more services than they could have ever imagined, and most of it they never wanted. And so in that regard, people have to be on guard in terms of what's being offered by the doctor and if it's really in their best interest. If you need a pacemaker, everybody expects that you're going to get the pacemaker, otherwise you're going to die. But I've actually seen several people through the emergency room who've said, if it's my time and my heart's ready to poop out, I don't really want that pacemaker stopping my journey forward. And it seems very odd, but yet it's an option that people don't even consider. And I try to be as open-ended about these conversations and making sure that they have free choice in all of these decisions, whether or not they proceed with their chemotherapy. And especially after they've done it for several years, I really give them permission not to proceed because I only see it causing more heartache, suffering, and this ability. Palliative care is all about giving people permission to have the choice not to do what business as usual.
No, I get that, and you're right. I mean, I think when we realize what the cost is to our system, and I said earlier, some have said it's as much as 50% of the Medicare expenditures are spent and attributed to 5% of the beneficiaries in their last year of life, and why do people go through these heroic means? And if they just knew. And my question to you, and it was something we talked about at the break, is who should be promoting this? Scott mentioned family physicians. You mentioned earlier social workers.
Well, I really think it comes down to the emergency room doctor because we're indifferent. We're not their primary doctor. We're not a specialist. I get no kickback, but I can clearly see, listening to the patient, what the history is, what they've been going through, and what if it makes sense to proceed. Because like you said, somebody with pancreatic cancer, we already know the prognosis is fairly dismal. So when a person comes in with pancreatic cancer into the emergency room, I'm saying, do you have a palliative care resource? Do you have somebody on the other side of the stretcher who says, when the going gets tough, you have some other options not to proceed with business as usual or a treatment protocol that's been outlined? Most people wait for the doctor to tell them what to do when they're up against the edge there. But unless you have the ability to say, they're tempting me into this state of existence that I really never imagined myself having to go through. Now, palliative care, I always message as being to me, there's the devil's advocate, which I presume is the doctor, and the guardian angel, which is more the palliative nurse. The palliative nurse would never make you, would guard you against any of those decisions about putting feeding tubes in. And this is so funny. A friend of mine said he was making some medical decisions for his cousin, and he had put the feeding tube in her, and I kind of wondered why he didn't ask me about that decision. He said, "I know what you were going to say. you were going to say not
to do it."
It's it's so funny to have that sort of already knowing where I'm coming from in these conversations, because they know they're doing wrong in some respects.
Bob, I'm thinking about clients that you might have on service that have a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's dementia or something, and you've got your special programs. It almost feels like a palliative approach should be involved or introduced right away, because you've got a chronic, disease, illness that's going to end in death. It always does. And why that doesn't. The approach doesn't get introduced right at that point.
It should be a public health policy.
Yeah.
When persons come in the emergency room, we check about their immunizations. We ask a lot of questions. When somebody comes in with a chronic illness, particularly involving their heart or their brain or their lungs, we should be required to say, do you have a palliative resource?
Wow.
And if they don't have it, let's get you one, because you need it.
We got about 30 seconds here, Dr. Haselhorst, and I want you to have kind of the final say. This booklet, how do you get this, and what would be your final thoughts that you would like to leave with our listening audience?
Is palliative care right for you? It's available on Amazon. No one's going to give you this insight that I've given you through this easy-to-read booklet. It makes it it speaks to the heart of the person in terms of how to balance both sides of your thinking. And when you have the ability to know that you want palliative care, when you come into the emergency room, you say, I receive palliative care. That makes a whole difference in how.
Go out to Amazon. Dr. Haselhorst, thank you very much. Make it a great day. Have a great weekend. Scott, Samantha, Joe, Noodles, thanks for being with me.
If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress HomeCare Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit CypressHomeCare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.
Every morning at 8 a.m., get timely market updates, breaking news on market movers, and strong analysis on financial topics to help you plan, invest, insure, retire, and stay retired. Don't miss Mastering Money every morning at 8 a.m., Monday through Friday. Hear best-selling author and wealth manager Steve Jurich, along with his great lineup of financial experts, CPAs, and attorneys. Mastering Money now at 8, right here on Money Radio AM 1510 and 105.3 FM. See you there.
Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.
KFNN Mesa, Phoenix. Well, the markets are closed in observance of Good Friday, but finished the week strong with the Dow up 254 points at 24,103. The S&P 500 finished up 35 at 2640. The Nasdaq was up 114 at 7063. Once again, the market is closed in observance of Good Friday.
When people want to talk about money, this is the place they come to. And there's more on the way after this break for the latest news. And we begin now.